Hi, I am Julie Jacobson, Town Manager, and I want to welcome you to our workshop this evening on the proposed Village Center District Bylaw. And shortly, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Wood from CMRPC, who's our planner, but I just want to give you a little background about what this is and what it's all about. I also want to just recognize Selectman Dan Carpenter, who's here this evening, and we have a number of board and commission members too, so we really appreciate all of you coming in. And you're also going to hear from Shannon Regan, who's our Economic Development Coordinator, about some other things that we're working on in Drury Square in addition to this. And I also want to introduce and thank Matt Benoit, who was at the table out front and has now moved in here. He's our town planner and energy manager. So we received a DLTA, which is a local technical assistance grant from the state, to work with CMRPC as our consultant on this village district bylaw. And there are a number of communities in central Massachusetts that are working on something similar to this. As many of you know, because I see some familiar faces, we've been in the process over the last couple of years of doing a lot of different planning, really trying to focus on revitalizing and making Drury Square an attractive place so our businesses can thrive here and our residents can enjoy it. Auburn doesn't really have, as you know, we don't really have an identified downtown, but if there was a downtown, it would be Drury Square. We know that because we're here, and you know that because you're residents and business owners, but a lot of visitors here don't know that. So we're constantly trying to look at ways to enhance Drury Square's visibility, its aesthetic appeal. We've got a project coming up with the state, a roadway reconstruction project on the entire width of Auburn Street, from probably right around the bridge, right near McDonald's, all the way up to the other bridge near the Mass Pike. So there are going to be the road will be reconstructed. We're working with them to try to put some nice design elements into that, some additional signage, some nice lighting, maybe some widened sidewalks, some nice stamped crosswalks so it's attractive. And we're always looking for ways that we can enhance it. So again, the businesses will be excited to be here. We can hopefully try to attract and get new business into some of the vacant space over the years. And we've also got an economic development plan, and I see some of you participated in that. That was approved about a year and a half ago, and we talked a lot in that plan about the importance of Drury Square to Auburn and to our economic development. And we also are in the process, and Greg Bowling is here, of doing a master plan, which we hope will be completed this year, within this fiscal year. Very long process, but again, a part of it is this Drury Square area. And then lastly, and then I'll turn it over to Shannon, we have a Drury Square vision plan that we did just specific to Drury Square. And these aren't plans that we intend on having them sit on a shelf. The whole intent of having these plans is to implement them. So we are constantly applying for grants and working with our state and federal officials to try to find ways to implement the strategies that we've identified in these plans. Grant money for roads, grant money for signage, hopefully grant money for some nice plantings and maybe some nice hanging flags and things to identify Drury Square and just, again, make it attractive. So Shannon's just going to talk to you about a couple of initiatives, and then we're going to turn it over to Elizabeth. So thank you. And again, this is Shannon. She's our Economic Development Coordinator. And Shannon's been with the town for about three or 4 years now. She's worked for us. We created this position, economic development position, about maybe 6-8 months ago. And Shannon took the position. She's an Auburn resident. Her has been here her whole life, and she's doing a great job. So I'm going to turn it over to Shannon.
So like Julie said, we're working on a few initiatives that go along with this piece. One of the main things is the facade improvement plan for Drury Square businesses in the area. We held a public meeting with the business owners and tenants. They all got invited to come to see if they'd be interested in a possible facade improvement program. We're still working out the details. We applied for a grant with CMRPC to help with some renderings and some feedback to see what the look should be like along the strip. So hopefully we'll hear back about that grant soon to see if we can move forward with the renderings and move forward with the program fully. So we're still in the beginning processes. This will be another part of it to get some feedback of what people would like to see and or not like to see in the area, and that will help me kind of plan that new program as well. So that's the main initiative that goes along with this. And now I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Shannon. As Julie said, I'm Elizabeth Wood. I'm here from the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission, otherwise known as CMRPC. And we're not going to be super formal tonight. It's a workshop. I want everybody to participate, or anybody that wants to participate. There are microphones around the room. If at any point you feel like you want to ask a question or add a comment, you're welcome to do so. We're a small enough group that it won't get that chaotic if you all participate. So first of all, I want to piggyback on what Julie said. We're very fortunate to get a grant to work on this Village Center District bylaw. And what our goal is to have something on the warrant in the spring of 2019. Now, just a little bit of history here. Your town planner, Matthew Benoit, and a bylaw committee has been working on this since March, so the last 6 months or so. They've been reviewing the draft of the bylaws. They've been talking this over, making edits, and getting it ready to present to the public. But we want full public feedback. This is for the town. This isn't the bylaw committee's bylaw. It is your bylaw. So we want to hear from you. So any questions or concerns, we welcome them tonight. We want to let you know that we're not starting from scratch here. Tonight is not the first meeting that we've had on Village Center District bylaws. There were several, one back as far as 2015. They started working on this, and there were 2 meetings in 2017. Did anybody in this room attend any of those meetings? So a few of you were here for them. I believe there was a site walk. Well, now we're trying to move past a lot of the analysis and a lot of the research and move towards something that's actually going to stick in the books and be able to implement and actually get some changes in Drury Square. So there are 4 documents that we're going off of to create this bylaw. Matthew Benoit was very good in providing these to CMRPC, and we looked through them all. The first one was the Auburn master plan. I know you're redoing your master plan, but you do still have one that's ongoing, and then we drew from that. There's also, as Julie mentioned, there's a planning vision and design guidelines for Drury Square. A lot of public outreach was done to form that document. And then you have an economic development plan and a comprehensive housing plan. And all of those documents reference Drury Square. And I went through them all and took out comments and took out points and included them in the bylaw that you have in front of you. When you came in the door, you were greeted by Matthew Benoit. Did everyone get a copy? If you didn't get a copy of the draft bylaw, raise your hand and Matthew will give you one. So everybody has a copy of that? Okay. Very good. This is a little small, and I don't normally read from slides, but I want to let you know that from the previous meetings, there were comments that were made that were taken into consideration for this bylaw that you have in front of you tonight. We're not again, starting from scratch. In addition to those documents, those 4 documents that I mentioned, we drew from public comment. And I'm going to quickly read these comments that were points that were made that we took to heart when we were working on this. Well, first of all, the Village Center Bylaw District is, who's familiar with what a Village Center bylaw is, or a Village Center district? Okay, so essentially, Auburn doesn't have a downtown, as Julie said, and we're trying to evolve into something that might become a downtown, something where you can walk, something where you can do your shopping, visit a cafe, then maybe do your banking, and then maybe get your haircut, all in one stop without parking and reparking. And so it's a pedestrian-friendly, mixed-use offices, retail, services, and also a housing element we want to include in this so that people can live and work and do their business in this downtown, this new downtown area. And this isn't something that happens overnight. This isn't something you're going to see next year. This is something that takes several decades to be implemented because we don't force anybody to change their property. Your property is how it is. It's grandfathered the way it is. This is for redevelopment. So if somebody wants to redevelop the area, then you would have to redevelop it according to this bylaw. And that does take time to occur. So it's not going to be a brand new downtown that you're going to see in 2 years or even 5 years. It's probably going to be a couple decades. So with that being said, I want to go over the points that were said at other meetings, at the 3 meetings that I mentioned previously. It was important to the public that the new bylaw moves future buildings closer to the road and creates a sense of storefront activity. So you think of some of the places in Massachusetts that have that type of downtown. Perhaps Hudson is an example that is a smaller town that has the storefronts up front where you can walk and you can window shop and have bustling activity up front along the sidewalk. But with that development happening, it was important to the public at the previous 3 meetings that the bylaw minimizes noise and lighting disturbances into abutting businesses and residential uses. We don't want the neighborhoods that are surrounding Drury Square to be disturbed by excess noise or lighting. And in addition to that, the bylaw provides buffers between abutting residential zones and the village center district. So there's a transition, landscape buffers between the new zone and the surrounding properties. The bylaw also requires parking to be on the side or in the rear of the building. That's a big piece of the village center bylaw. During the 1950s and 60s, when the automobile became more prevalent in our American culture, there was a theory that you had to build parking up front and make it convenient. But when you do that, you isolate the pedestrians, and it's not as an attractive design concept. In a little bit, we're going to look at design concepts, and you'll see the difference between parking that's in the front and parking that's on the behind and on the sides. It makes a big difference in the appearance and the effect of it on having a walkable downtown. Another comment that was made was that the bylaw needs to provide adequate parking with proposed reductions due to parking sharing. So this is different than where the parking is going to be. It's how much parking are we going to have. If there's a business that operates at night, it can share parking with a business that operates during business hours 9 to 5. You don't need to have one parking space for the office and another parking space for the restaurant. They can share parking if they can prove that they're reciprocal uses. Next comment is it allows for off-site parking options. This means that parking doesn't need to actually be on site. Parking can be up to, I think the bylaw committee said it could be up to 500 feet away from where the place of business was. So you could park and have street parking or another parking spot and then walk to the business and not have it in the front. That flows into the next comment that it promotes a walkable, more pedestrian-friendly neighborhood and interconnectivity. That was very important to the people attending those workshops, that you can walk and have it interconnected with the neighborhood. In writing the bylaw, the public wanted us to provide clear example of what's allowed and what's not allowed. So you'll notice in the bylaw, as you page through it, you'll see there are allowed uses by right, there's allowed uses by special permit, and then there is a list of prohibited uses, and if it's not stated that it's allowed, it's considered prohibited. People that came to these workshops said they didn't want big box stores. They didn't want huge I don't want to mention names, but I will say Walmart because they're a poster child for big box. But stores like that are big commercial retail uses that are less mom and pop, family friendly type businesses. So the public said they wanted to provide limits on the size of business uses. So you'll notice in the bylaw, if you page through it, that there's limitation of 10,000 square feet on the size of business uses. And that's also services included in that also. And then another the final comment that was stated that we took note of was that the bylaw promotes preservation of historic aspects of the neighborhood. And when the bylaw committee went through this, they said, well, wait a minute, a lot of our history has already been destroyed. There's not a lot left to protect. But if we move to the piece that Shannon mentioned with design guidelines, we can look at examples of what Auburn looked like in the past and take examples from past architecture and reintegrate them into the new redevelopment that's going to occur. So those were the comments that came out. I'm sure we'll have plenty more tonight. And here's a map of Drury Square. It shows what's owned by the town, what's owned by the USPS, and what's privately owned. And then there's the street view. I don't think you can see it that well from the back there. I apologize for that. But we had a planner on our staff at CMRPC take this bylaw and look at what would actually occur on the ground. What would it look like if we actually implemented this bylaw that the bylaw committee came up with? And so I'm sure you're all familiar with Town Pizza. Here's an example of what it would look like if you made it more pedestrian friendly, bike friendly, and here's a side view. And then there's a rear view of the parking in the back. And then I'm just going to page through some other renderings of places around town, what they would look like if they were redeveloped according to the bylaw. There's Town Pizza again. There's the U.S. Post Office. And another thing we need to have with the village district bylaw is a good flow within the parking lot. So this is an example of traffic flow at the post office. And you want landscaped islands in the parking areas that are in the back, not a vast sea of asphalt. Here's the bird's eye view. Now, this diagram shows what it would look like if there was some infill development. So the white, you'll notice the white, there's gray, that's the post office, the gray roof. The white roofs are new development that would occur. And then, are people familiar with the Verizon Corner? Okay, this is an example of bird's eye view of what the Verizon Corner could look like if you developed it according to the bylaw. There's less setbacks from the property line. There's more less side setbacks from adjacent buildings, and again, you've got that parking in the rear and the side. Actually, this is mostly in the rear, to the side of the center buildings, but to the rear of the front-facing buildings. And then there's an example of what it might look like from the front, with the buildings in the back. I know we had a little bit of time. Some of you got here early and got to look at the bylaw. You'll notice there's a purpose section on the first page. Then there's definitions, and then it's broken down into uses. Allowed uses by right, allowed uses by special permit, then prohibited uses. And then it gets into the parking requirements, and bicycle and pedestrian flows, and site design. So I'm not going to read through this because you can do that on your own, and that would be very cumbersome to go through this whole document at this workshop. But I'd like, if you want to take some time to read it and ask questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. We want to know what you feel works, what doesn't work. Is there a use in there that you feel should be added, something that should be taken away? Is 10,000 square feet, is that too big for a retailer service use, or is that too small? Do you think we should allow larger businesses? And I would, if you're not shy, I'd encourage you to come to the microphones at the table so that we can hear you. I believe they're turned on, right?
All turned on. Folks have questions, and you just How many acres are applicable to this plan that you have proposed?
I'm going to have Matthew come up here too because he's most familiar with the town, and I think that's a question he can answer. The point was we were trying to start with something small, and we thought that if maybe this were successful and the public was happy with it, we could expand it to maybe a larger area in the future, but we wanted to start with something small, and Matthew can tell you how many acres.
Okay, so when you see the perimeter, this was one of the maps that was on our economic development plan. This shows the town-owned and the private-owned properties, as Elizabeth had mentioned. This is the intersection of Brotherton Way and Auburn Street. And that's the siding business. This runs along the railroad here up until the railroad bridge. And Southbridge Street and Holstrom Court are over here. Southbridge Street Court, excuse me. And then this includes post office, the Rob Roy Salon, MCU, Interstate, McDonald's, and Yong Shing, and the properties behind. So we're looking, mostly our focus is along Auburn Street and the businesses associated with it. Our question becomes, do we want to include some of the town property and even the Andoli's parcel in the back, where Shaw's and Bed Bath & Beyond are located? So are we centering it small? Do we want to get bigger? Do we want to go even larger? It's part of our discussion here today.
I think for the most impact for the area, that it's a pretty aggressive plan, what we've seen in my lifetime, or a few other people here. You said your beginning plan was down to the river, Dunn's Brook, but Matt explains that it goes further up to 290. So is it down to the brook, or is it up to 290?
I'd be interested to know what the consensus is. The committee's not firm on what that boundary edge is going to be yet, but we're here to collect feedback and what you feel is most appropriate. So
Okay.
Dunn's Brook is a smaller boundary. We're fine with that too.
When you say existing use is grandfathered, is the tenant grandfathered or is the use grandfathered?
Nothing that's already existing will have to make changes according to this bylaw. You see the renderings of Town Pizza and the post office. They're not required to make these changes if they don't want to. If you were to sell your property and someone wanted to repurpose it or redevelop it in some capacity, or redevelop multiple parcels, they would have to adhere to this bylaw. But this doesn't affect anyone who exists today if they're not willing to make that change.
So I live on Harrison Ave, which is right along Auburn Street. And we have a problem of speeders on our street trying to avoid the current Auburn Street lights, both traffic times. Are there going to be any changes to either end of Auburn Street to try to mitigate the traffic impact? I can imagine with making it more pedestrian friendly, basically more cars are going to be trying to avoid it. It's a very narrow street, no sidewalks. Kids can't play on it as it is because people are going down there at 40 miles an hour. What can be done?
That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. Certainly we'll take that under advisement. When Auburn Street's not going to get redeveloped till 2021. So it's a great comment for us to have and to pass on to DPW for you.
I know
Thank
that some residents have proposed speed bumps, making it a one-way, making it a dead end. I can't speak for everybody who lives there, but those have all been tossed out.
I remember about 10 years ago, there was some selectmen meetings regarding making Harrison Ave a one-way or so. I remember that being pretty contentious. Eventually, it stayed as is, but thank you for bringing that up, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, you talked about a new owner being required to follow the bylaws, but when would it kick in? Like, what kind of changes would cause a current owner to have to
If you wanted to
incorporate?
do an addition, if you wanted to do a new building, if you wanted to change your parking, then you would have to come forward. If you were going to just simply paint your building or change your sign, well, there's sign regulations in here too that you'd have to adhere to. But if it was a grandfathered sign, you would be able to keep that. you know, if you're going to just redo your roof or replace windows, replace doors, an owner can do that without having to redo, you know, without having to follow this bylaw. But if you're going to create new, like if you were going to add on a large addition, then you'd have to come forward and go by this.
And simply consider if you're adding to your footprint or if you're adding to impervious surface in any way. That's generally a trigger.
When I read through the bylaw, it mentions bicycle parking and bicycle friendly. Has any provision or any thought been given to having a dedicated bike lane in there?
Yeah, the bylaw doesn't, it encourages bicycle friendly and pedestrian friendly, but it doesn't actually, it would take a separate grant to redo the roads. And that's something that if people are feel strongly about it, that we can pursue looking for ways to do that. But, or maybe that's already in the works or being considered.
Both. So I just want to jump in. So when DOT, Mass Department of Transportation, has already scheduled us for funding for 2021 for Auburn Street. So that is a state project, but they work with the town on the layout, the design, and the concept ideas. So we have been working with the engineer to try to get the state to incorporate some enhancements to what would normally just be a roadway reconstruction project. Like I said, we'd like to see some nice sidewalks. We'd like to see better markings on the crosswalks for pedestrian safety. We'd like to see the road narrowed to the point where it can be under state guidelines, so that you slow down the traffic, so they're not flying through there and they're not flying by the businesses. People actually have a chance to stop and see the businesses. So we had talked about bike ways as well, and a connector, and I don't remember exactly where we were talking about incorporating it, but this does have to all get through the state. But we had said to them that we thought it'd be a great idea to have, if it wasn't even a dedicated lane, to have a bike, a marked section of it, because ultimately we'd like to be able to connect to the bike trail over off of 146. And I know that's a little bit further, but you've got to think of the whole picture, and you have to start thinking of the connections with your trails, whether they're biking or walking. So that is definitely something that is on the radar screen. That project hasn't been designed yet, so the comments that you're making tonight are critical, because there'll be plenty of opportunities for public input on the actual Auburn Street project itself. It's a multi-million-dollar project. I think is it $2.5 million and counting, and it's counting because we're asking them to put in more. And we're hoping the state will fund some of the things, but I should mention also that we will hopefully soon be getting a donation from the mall and Total Outdoor Media when their billboards are installed. And that donation, we're working on plans to use that money to enhance Drury Square. Maybe to put some nice planters, to put a very nice bus kiosk. Potentially it would be nice to enhance the park where the Goddard Rocket is. It would be nice to fix the Goddard Rocket and make it back into a fountain and put some picnic tables out and clean up the water and give people a chance, businesses and your employees, to go sit there at lunchtime. Maybe put some small sailboats so kids can go and have electronic sailboats and race them in the water. There's so many options that you can use for that area. And again, we're trying to tie that design into the actual roadway design on Auburn Street.
Hey, Matt, I just wanted to point out that in the vision document plan, there was actually a trail that goes through a lot of the town-owned property, and then potentially was, as a vision, extended out along the brook up to the north end of the property there, so, or the district. So there are considerations for pedestrian and potentially bicycle traffic that would be away from the street and through the middle of sort of the non-street areas.
As you come out of Brotherton Way, you said that the area was going to be to the left. I think if you take a look at the land along the front of the old railroad station up to the Central Square, it's not very appealing. In fact, Memorial Day, it hadn't even been trimmed. That is the gateway to the Auburn Mall from everyone in the South County. I think an effort should be made to include that area in the plan.
That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. And I know in talking with our DPW director, we've noticed that there's a worn path from pedestrian traffic of folks who walk on that particular strip. And I know that Mr. Coyle, our town engineer, has acknowledged that and I believe has made attempts to incorporate that with the Auburn Street reconstruction project, possibly a sidewalk or even cleaning up.
Are there any traffic counts going back a few years for Auburn Street and Swanson Road and around the mall?
I'm sure there are. I don't have them today, but I understand that they would be accessible, likely.
Well, I know where we had our business on Auburn Street that I spent many years there. The traffic now is a lot less than what it used to be because finally people going to the mall have learned what traffic pattern. It's amazing how easy it is to turn out onto Auburn Street now compared to years ago. So if you're going to narrow the road, you're going to create even less traffic than you have now. And if you take some traffic counts, I think you'd be amazed that that has dropped off.
That's a great point. Thank you.
As we're talking here, and I'm thinking, and it's going to sound probably convoluted and grandiose, but it looks like within this district, where the fire department is, the post office, and even the library, that the town owns those parcels and has them, and they take up a lot of space. And if you were really wanted to create an environment like we're speaking about that you want to gravitate to, you want people to come to, or even the residents to be able to enjoy, like downtown Hudson. And I know it's getting trendy for towns to have municipal complexes, and I couldn't help but think, and I'm just speaking out loud as we're here tonight, if the fire department and the post office and even the library weren't there, and then that site was actually open to development, especially with a site like Toys R Us, wide open and sort of blighted, would it not behoove them to relocate? I know there's too many variables intertwined with that, but if you really wanted to create a downtown, it would seem like that would open up a lot of room for development, true development. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much for that comment. Julie?
Yeah, thank you. As a follow-up on that, just for informational purposes, we have put out an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications for design firms to come in and do a feasibility study of our public safety facilities, looking at the fire headquarters, the fire station on West Street, as well as the police station, and taking a look at those facilities and trying to get back to us with, should we expand each of those buildings? Should we add on? Should we build a new facility for police, a separate facility for fire? Should we combine and build a public safety facility, or should we just improve what we have? So we are, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we will be announcing that we've selected a firm through a state bidding process that we went through, and that would be something that would be looked at. That subject that you brought up did come up a lot in the Drury Square plan. There was a lot of, the whole idea of having a vision plan is what is the future vision? And, what you see here now, today, might not be what you want to see 20 years from now. So we were asking people for large ideas and future ideas. And a number of people did talk about the fire station. One of the things that came out was the fact that the library is there, and the library could be better incorporated into Drury Square because it is there and it is a large parcel. So we've actually put in a request through the state, and I don't know that we'll get it, but through the bond bill, Senator Moore and Representative Frost agreed to put in a request for us for, I think we put in for $500,000 to renovate Goddard Park and potentially put a bridge between Goddard Park and the library. So when people are over at the library, they can do some more outdoor programming. They could walk across the dam there and get over to the Goddard Park side. So we're trying to look at the whole picture and how do you incorporate better municipal properties, because you're right, that whole area in blue is what the town owns. So if you can't move it or relocate it, what can we do to maximize its effectiveness and make it a better place for people to be? One thing I should probably point out too, Matt might have, so this parcel here, in the Drury Square vision plan, we talked a lot about if and when this gets redeveloped, you know, this is where the supermarket is, it would be nice to have buildings like this bylaw is suggesting up front more. You don't want to walk along, if you're going to make this pedestrian friendly and make it so people feel comfortable and safe walking through this area and stopping and going to businesses, or maybe going to a cafe and frequenting the businesses that are already here, and you want them to come down this direction and maybe come up through the mall, you've got to have more of a sense of pedestrian friendly and a better scale. So it would be nice to see this area redeveloped with these buildings closer to the street and the parking behind, and maybe even a mixed-use development there where you have some, you know, maybe some nice, a smaller condominium with some retail underneath, because it's right near the pike. And it might generate more people, which brings more businesses, which helps the businesses that are there. So those are some of the ideas we had. So we did talk about the potential of including this in the area. Again, the question is, how far do you want to go with it? Do you want to put restrictions on this parcel for future redevelopment? It's something worth thinking about. Thanks.
Do we have an example of a business that's currently about the 10,000 square foot range, just for reference?
That's a good question.
It's hard to say, you know, what, is that too big or too small if we don't really have an idea. The other thing I wanted to ask is there going to be any sort of economic incentives for businesses currently existing to possibly redevelop? I noticed one of the prohibited uses was automotive use, which if something like Interstate Transmission wanted to redevelop or change their building in some way, they would essentially be prohibited from doing so unless they brought themselves up to standard, but even then they would still be, the use would take it out of the equation.
Yes, there are, and Shannon can speak to that.
So the current businesses, like we said, would be grandfathered in. The only time they would have to comply is obviously if they were doing an addition or anything, but they're currently in that space, so that would allow them to continue doing their business as they are. For incentives, I just began this position relatively recently, so one of my main initiatives for this area, like I said, was the facade improvement, which we're still developing, but it would be, we're working with Central One Federal Credit Union to offer lower interest rate loans and at lower amounts as well. So say if someone simply wanted to change out their canopies and their windows, a lot of times it's hard to get a loan for that small amount with a reasonable interest rate. They agreed with us to have a special package for those businesses to take advantage of. Obviously in the future, we'd look at hopefully something where we potentially could do grants along down in the future. Obviously, we still have to work that out depending on money and all of that. So we're trying to think of incentives to help out businesses as a way to not scare them away to make changes, but to help them along to make changes, because we are aware that there's a lot proposed to be changing in the area, and to help them out. We understand it costs a lot to renovate or bring up to, you know, get new signage or get new canopies. So we're trying to help them out along that process. So that's still in the works. That's one of the incentives. A lot of, sorry, excuse me. A lot of the other incentives are through the state and the federal government, through the Small Business Association, stuff like that, which obviously I'm always available to help businesses if they're ever looking for some resources like that. I can connect them to the right people and help them through that process as well. But that's what we have currently, and it's an ongoing effort on my end also to try to help out, to offer incentives on the local side as well. And obviously out of the economic development plan, one of the key recommendations was have a staff person that really can focus on the business community, since the commercial base is such a large part of our taxes. And obviously we took that suggestion, so now I work for the town full-time in that capacity, so it will just help moving forward to do that too. And I don't know if you have any follow-up with specific incentives or anything, any ideas you have.
We own the interstate property, where interstate transmission is. And I had a previous question, what was grandfathered? You just mentioned that the business was grandfathered. And if the business changed in that square footage, that it would come under the new bylaw?
Yeah, a change in business would come under the new bylaw. It would have to be either a allowed use by special permit, or Otherwise, you'd need to get a variance.
Okay, so anything in here would be all right. Though it does say in here, auto-related uses, such as a car wash. There's a car wash there. So once that goes, another one could not come in,
Correct.
okay? Auto detail, once it goes, it cannot come in. Repair is there, so once it goes, it cannot come in. And gas station used to be there. So, as long as the building maintained its same footprint, the uses that are there are grandfathered. Not the tenant, the uses.
The uses. Correct, the uses.
Okay, she said that, well, that's the tenant. One other item, the parking lot next to the post office. Do you know who owns it?
That's the building with Weeping Willies in front of it, right? That multi-tenant building?
No, the parking lot right across from the barber shop next to the post office.
I believe it's both. There's a dividing line that goes right down the middle of it.
All right, years ago, that was blocked off by Holstrom's with Jersey barriers because of, no, he took the Jersey barriers and put them behind his store to stop the peacock. No, the Jersey barriers were put up by the people who owned the post office because people like from the barber shop were using it. So I don't know if everyone has a permitted use of that parking lot. I think it's something you should definitely look into because it has been blocked off in the past just for post office use. Thank you. I really want to compliment you. I think this is long overdue for Auburn. Auburn is a unique town. Most other towns have centers that grew around mills and things of that nature. We've always been nothing more really than a bedroom community to Worcester, and that's why we don't have a center like other towns do.
I noticed tattoo and body piercing salons are a prohibitive use in the area. Was there specific comments or feedback that led to that? Or?
So the zoning bylaw review committee is 5 residents. That was their consensus opinion. That's why we're here, to get feedback on such uses as that. If you find that to be an issue, it's something that can be changed.
My feedback would be as a compromise to move that into the by special permit section.
Just a comment of second and third.
Other questions, comments?
Could you just talk a little bit about the effect on property values? Because if someone were selling, now they're going to have quite a few restrictions on these properties that fall within that area. So,
You could call it restrictions, but there's also allowances. You're allowed to have businesses where you might not have been able to do so before.
could you elaborate? What do you mean by that?
You know, we need to speak to the assessor who is in here today to talk about, that's a good idea, and that's for a future meeting. We'll consult with the assessor and see what might happen to property values. But yeah, you're correct that with the new zone, it could change property values. And that's something we're gonna look into and find out for the next workshop.
Okay, and I'm referring not just to assessed values, but market
Sale
value.
values,
When
yep.
you go on the market and somebody's looking at this and thinking, oh, no, thank you.
So my general opinion, and it's just my opinion, is I think that what's being proposed here actually offers more flexibility than what's already in the local business zoning district. I think there's more restrictions in LB than what we're proposing here today. Allowing some things by site plan review is considered a by right use just with design components to be reviewed by the planning board. Most of the local business district is allowed by special permit as an approve or deny situation. That's the kind of thing that scares away folks from buying properties. But when they see it just needs to be designed with the planning board, that's more enticing. So and that's just my opinion based on how I know the local business district is zoned out. But as Elizabeth pointed out, that's definitely something we're going to be exploring in further detail.
Very good question.
You mentioned if you sell the property, that the new bylaw comes into effect?
No, the new bylaw comes into effect if the voters voted in the spring. But if you sell your property and the new person the new owner coming in is operating the business as it was, the ordinance wouldn't, the bylaw would not kick in.
Okay, our property is leased. We lease.
So if a new leasee came in and wanted to do the same type of business that was already there, you
No.
wouldn't need to go through anything. But if they wanted a different use,
No, if we sell the property, and two of the businesses there have 15 leases that can last as long as 15 years. If we sell property, the new property owner has to honor the lease. Sale of the property does not negate or stop the lease.
Correct.
Right? So if the property sells, those uses there can continue.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, think of it as a use, like even if Subway wanted to leave and you wanted to have a similar use by description, it's another food service industry, that wouldn't change.
No, I was addressing the fact that she said if you sell the property.
Yeah.
So a sale is not going to change anything.
No.
the sale does not kick in anything.
Just who pays the taxes, I guess. Thank you.
Questions, comments, or even ideas? Does anyone have any envisioning ideas of what could change or?
So we are hoping to have future workshops. We're now looking into October, and we could pick a date based on availability. I think I need to lean towards the town manager and Matthew to help me pick a date. But we want to keep this rolling. We want to research any questions you have that we aren't unable to answer tonight and come back with answers. Okay, we're still taking questions. I'm just speaking to what we have coming up. But since we want to get this on the warrant in the spring, we're hoping to have monthly meetings. If we need more, we'll have more. But we want to get as much public feedback as we can and address any concerns. And like you said back there, you want to see something changed into a special use with a special permit. That's something we can consider. If there's other comments of that nature, maybe you'll go home and you'll read this and come back with more ideas and more comments for the October meeting. That's what we hope. And I believe somebody had a question.
So, in previous meetings, I'm guessing this probably came up, as far as, was there any discussion about the intersection at Swanson Road and Southbridge Street down toward the water department area, the driving range, and what will become of that? I mean, it can't get worse, so, but is that part of a longer range plan? Man, I know we're talking baby steps here to get this going, and that's a massive undertaking, but was that part of the original meeting stuff?
It was during our visioning workshop with our Harriman Group consultant for the Downtown Initiative Grant. We talked about doing the entire local business district all the way to the overpass where the water district is, making that the Drury Square area. But it's a lot easier, and Elizabeth and I agree with this, is focusing on a smaller area, seeing what fits, seeing what works, and then branching it out to fill in the rest of the zone. The local business zone at its north kind of stops right around here, but it moves farther south all the way down to the area that you're talking about. If some of the things that we implement with this village district area work, then we can spread that down further and see what works for those areas also.
If it works in that area on a smaller basis, we were thinking of doing it more for the other districts as well, bringing it along down.
Hey, Matt, I would just wanted to add that Master Plan Committee is also looking at all of the zoning districts in town, including local business and what is and isn't allowed today, and we'll be making possible recommendations to are these still appropriate going forward or not. So that is a process that is currently ongoing.
Hearing about the development of Goddard Park and making everything more walkable, right now crossing Southbridge Street, if you're going from Shaw's to the library or from the other corner, is not a good idea because of the traffic and the arrows with the lights, and even though there is the crosswalk. At a meeting some time ago, I don't remember, somebody talked about a pedestrian bridge over Southbridge Street.
right near the brook, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was part of the vision report also, and that's with the pedestrian footpath that Greg mentioned a moment ago, was connecting the library to the high school parcel, and that gives you a crossing. We had talked about that, the town manager and I, along with DPW, and we understand that that is a scary place to cross the street. Pedestrian bridge would obviously be a lot of money, and if it was an overpass bridge or whatnot, but it's not off the table. It's still something that for us to consider, but no, it's not proposed today, but it is definitely something that's been brought up by our consultants also.
Okay.
Anything you'd like to see that we haven't brought up?
Art. Like, where the tennis courts are, to the west, there's the beginning of the town pizza building, and there's a big white stark wall there. It's a big canvas. And I think it would, like they're doing in Worcester all over the place, it'd be great to see some of that stuff incorporated, not just in Drury Square, but all over town, where all this big expanse of cement you're looking at. But yeah, that's something I had always thought of, so that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
So you're thinking of like Powwow, Worcester,
Like a
where they
mural?
work with local artists? Yeah, okay.
Are there any plans for public parking?
I'm glad you asked. I believe we have been tossing back and forth an idea that there's actually a little parking after the fire station in between that and the multi-use building. I actually didn't know that we owned it. Took a while to figure that out. I thought it was a large parking lot for that other building, but we were considering making that a public use parking area as part of the Auburn Street reconstruction project, possibly. I don't think we'll get state funds for that. That might be out of pocket for us. That might be metered parking or something like that. But that's also an opportunity that we had discussed loosely, was for kayak launch or even boat launch to Auburn Pond. That would also include cleaning up Auburn Pond, as most of you know how it looks today.
There isn't much parking from Drury Square up to 290. In fact, the Chinese restaurant, I think, still has valet parking where they park in the high school.
Right.
Okay. I think you need public parking
Agreed.
if this is going to work, because I don't know if you counted how many parking places there are at the post office and Town Pizza and in the back of Harry Joe's Sandwich Shop or whatever it's called.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got McDonald's, it's not a lot.
It's true. It's true. And on-street parking is too tight for us to consider multiple lanes or even bike access and then pedestrian sidewalks. On-street parking would create more of an issue. So part of Drury Square's biggest problem is lack of land area. It's only so many buildings. It's only so much space. Who knows, maybe the feasibility report for the emergency management facilities gives us something to work with on the fire station parcel or not, but it's certainly something we have to consider also. I'm glad you brought it up.
I want to echo what you're saying, Dick. That's really important to get the parking. One of the things that we recognize is if we want to help bring pedestrians and bring vehicles into that area to support our local businesses, we have to make it, first of all, we have to make it, people feel safe. As you said, no one's going to cross Southwood Street if they don't have to. Right now it's dangerous. So also looking at different things to draw people to where the pizza area is, where Weepin' Willie's is, and maybe by designing wider areas with sidewalks there, people could actually have outdoor cafes. And to go to your art idea, we thought ideally, you talk about the vision, and you have to be creative. You can't, you have to think outside the box, but 10 years from now, 15 years from now, it'd be nice to see a number of different mom and pop restaurants in there that had outdoor seating in the nice weather. You could have an art stroll. A lot of communities do that. They have a small business district where the businesses get together, and on Thursday nights they have a wine and cheese thing in their businesses. It draws people in. Or you have an art night where some artists maybe bring their artwork in and display it in a little cafe, and people can sit outside. Just thinking of all the different things that you could do if you had the space there. And as Matt said, the space really isn't there now, or the space that's there isn't pedestrian friendly. So it's trying to enhance that area to make businesses and tenants look at it and say, wow, I really want to be there. That would be a great place for me to fit. So to echo what Elizabeth said, a lot of the uses that you see in there that the bylaw committee came up with, they're certainly willing to look at other options for, did we miss something? What other kind of business? You know, make sure we encourage art stores and some unique, maybe gallery space, things that we don't have now. But again, if you start creating an area, you know, in the future, you can actually do a nice redevelopment. It just takes time.
Right. I'm going to leave my business cards in the back. If there's something you wanted to say but not publicly, you can email me. Or if you go home and you have an idea at 2 o'clock in the morning and you really want to get it across, email me. I'll be checking those and taking them into consideration for the next workshop. It's going to be in October. We're going to have to check on the facility availability to get the exact date, but I'm assuming it'll probably be a Monday, Tuesday, or a Wednesday. Just check the social media. We'll also put something in the newspaper. We'll do another press release announcing the next meeting, or you could just email me and say, hey, when's the next meeting? Did that get decided? And I'll respond to you.
Also, if you hadn't signed in yet, we're going to send a follow-up email to this event to you folks, so you have our contact information also. I just have a couple of questions for folks. How many of you got the letter in the mail to your business? All right. Just wanted to check. Did you hear about the event from social media? Hand up. Okay. Or did you hear about it by just stopping by Town Hall and seeing a flyer? All right. Just want to figure out the best way to get in touch with folks. If the mailers aren't getting to you, then we're not going to spend the money to do that. We'd rather reach out to you the best way that works for you. Is there any other ways to contact business owners or even yourselves that might be more effective in your opinions? Other than stopping by, knocking on the door? Email? Okay. All right. So make sure if you haven't, that we have your email here today, and we'll do that.
And it'd be useful on the sign-in sheet if you are a business owner in the area, if you can kind of like make a note of that, so I can kind of have a list of emails for the business owners as well. Because right now I'm doing snail mail, which sometimes isn't the best way. So that'd be great.
And I want to thank everybody for coming out and giving your time tonight. It's an important topic, and it's going to impact the entire town. So thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.